Happy Thursday, everybody. You know, we've got a big week next week. Free agency begins, and we're going to be reacting to all of the big news and all of the running backs that are changing teams or re-signing with their teams, whatever the case may be. And there's going to be some pretty big stuff. So we're going to have our regular Monday show, but it's not going to be at 10 a.m. We're going to wait a little bit later in the day. We'll just kind of do that throughout the week and just see how the news unfolds. So be flexible. So today, instead of, getting into a topic like free agency or something, we're going to take a little more broad view here. Let's see how high my voice can go when I say that. And we're going to take a look at roster building and give you some tips for building your best successful fantasy roster. And we're doing it with Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg. I'm Adam Azer, of course. And Ben Gretsch is coming on the show. Isn't that cool?
Hi. Yes, always cool.
I love Ben Gretsch. He's great. He'll be on in a few minutes, actually. So we're going to knock out the news and notes beforehand, but we'll try to give you some tips. And I meant to go back and look at my tips from last year. They probably didn't work out because last year was totally weird. Everything that historically happened just didn't really happen last year. We'll get into that. But hopefully there's a lot of things that we can give you. And Ben's got some fresh outside perspective as well. Dave and Jamie, what's up? How you guys doing? Good?
I'm great.
Good.
What's with everybody's voices? Did I miss the helium truck today? What the hell?
You may have missed something yesterday, but Thomas Schaefer had his best thumbnail by far yesterday. I forgot to give you credit for that, Schaefer. That was an awesome thumbnail. Please check it out on YouTube. Also, Ben Gretsch just told me that he's ready to go, but he doesn't have the link to the stream. So that's on me. Let me go ahead and send that to him. News and notes. Atlanta reportedly interested in Kirk Cousins, Dave Richard. Seems like that could be happening, but it doesn't seem fair to say right now that he's not going to be on the Vikings next year. Is that the buzz?
I'm not ready to say that he definitively will not be on the Vikings. I think that there's a pretty decent chance that he's not on the Vikings, but Minnesota has time to up their offer if they so choose and bring him back. It would be a little different to see him in Atlanta, but obviously you'd feel a lot better about all the options in that offense if Kirk Cousins goes there. And no question, Arthur Blank wants to win. He's basically told his GM, get me a quarterback. I don't think they want to go the rookie route. I'm not sure if they even want to go the young veteran route. I think they want to look at getting the best the best veteran who's established that they can. And I think Cousins is as good as it gets there. Money isn't the issue at all. He could be a Falcon by the end of next week.
Maybe Minnesota's done with him.
Could be.
Maybe. Out of the combine, there's so many coaches saying, oh, yeah, we really want to get this guy back. But, they don't really mean it. I don't know if that's...
some do, some don't.
Well, I think the guy. I think, what matters is money. Kirk Cousins may want the Brinks truck, and Minnesota might not think at 35 coming off an Achilles injury that he's worth it.
Here's another factor, and this is something that I was wrong about when we did our bonus pod on Russell Wilson. Russ has offsets in his contract. So remember when you were talking about he doesn't need the money, Adam. He could sign somewhere cheap. He might be inclined to sign somewhere cheap because then the Broncos have to pay him more. And so he could literally sign for the league minimum somewhere. So if there's a team that's a little cash strapped, and maybe they're okay giving Russell Wilson a shot. Again, he is an established veteran. I don't know if he's a good established veteran, but you're going to be able to get him for cheap. And maybe Minnesota looks at that situation and says, okay, well, we could overpay for Kirk Cousins, or we could just go the cheap route and have Russell Wilson and hope that we can coax something out of him that wasn't like what he did in Denver. We'll see what happens.
Well, Russ and a rookie would make some sense. You can't go into, if you're competitive, thinking Russell Wilson's going to get you over the top.
Agreed. But the rookie doesn't have to be one of the top three rookies. You can get by with Russ and Penix or Russ and Bo Nix and say, okay, we've got a plan for now and we've got a plan for the future. Something like that.
How rude are you guys? Let me just introduce Ben already. He's been on for 30
you brought him on while Dave was giving a very good answer. So that's bad on your part again. Hey, Ben.
I don't want to make him.
We do it. I was enjoying the Russell Wilson conversation. I was getting a live seat at the show. It was beautiful.
Yeah, we did a whole bonus episode on it, and he can go anywhere. Dave said the Broncos would have to pay him more if he takes less. That just means that the money that they owe him, whatever someone else pays Russell Wilson, comes off of
Denver's books. Right.
So it's not like his salary goes up, but whatever Denver owes would be affected. What's going
And
on?
where are
Ben?
you on Russ as a guy in that area?
I mean, Seattle. Where he spent a lot of his time. He's been pretty poor the last couple of years. I think I'm pretty out on him. I get him as a bridge quarterback. To me, I mean, yeah, you can get him at so cheap that you don't have to deal with the veteran cap hit of. It is a unique situation, right? Like typically we get the rookie quarterback and the surplus value you can generate from that. There's the potential for Russ to generate surplus value for the new team. I just don't know that he's good enough at this point anymore. It's kind of the concern for me.
Yeah. Right. We talked about him a little bit on Beyond the Box Score. I showed Dave a clip of him on, I think it was a 4th down and 3 from the 35-yard line. He scrambled and he picked up the first down. If he keeps his eyes up for a tenth of a second longer, he hits Jerry Jeudy for a 35-yard touchdown. Judy's
you're assuming Jeudy catches the ball.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, though, with Russell Wilson, I think, of him not seeing people, Ben.
There's a lot of people that have shown that he was really good on like a per attempt basis. One of my favorite sort of bad faith arguments I've seen is how him and Mahomes stacked up on a per attempt basis. And it's the volume element of it is so key. The Chiefs kept dropping Mahomes back against these 2 deep shells with extra DBs on the field and asking him to beat pass defenses. The Broncos were basically trying to hide Russ for most of the year, play the whole offense through the running backs, and then use him off play action and in situations that are higher efficiency passing situations. The volume is the difference, right? He was still efficient on a per play basis. I don't think at this point in his career, you can ask him to be the drop back guy that goes and wins you games in key spots and when you're trailing late and those things. And that's what you need in a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, at least.
And
I want to give this stat.
Very patient coach. Sean Payton did not like Russell Wilson.
No. Right.
Well, I want to give this stat on Wilson again, because I mentioned it yesterday, but just to get your thoughts on it, right? Russell Wilson was 19th in pass attempts on the season, 19th overall in pass attempts, but he was 29th in pass attempts I just randomly picked 8 to 15 yards. So what you saw from him was almost, like I said, it's an exaggeration to say, but pretty much all he did was throw really short or really deep. And that's just weird, kind of hard to evaluate. But it also gives you some perspective. I think he was absolutely terrible for a guy like Jerry Jeudy and much better for a guy like Cortland Sutton and all the running backs. But, that's just so unique to see a quarterback that just lived on receiver screens and running back screens and deep balls.
It probably shows he's a little bit afraid to throw into coverage.
Or he's not asked to throw into coverage because of what Ben said. They're hiding him, or they were trying to hide him.
Look at this comment. Ben Goach. He's the GOAT. They love you. They love Ben Grad. Yes, Ben, for you newer listeners, is on our team for a while. And now he's one of our top guests. So
we tried to trade Adam for Ben to get him back, but unfortunately the other side was not taking.
It feels like just yesterday, but I was telling Adam I was kind of late here today because I'm going through something with my daughters that Dave was telling me back. It's so many years ago. It was coming. The teenage years were coming. So my daughter's about to turn 13, my oldest, and she's in middle school. And so like this morning I find out she has a special event and she has to go early to school today. And she had told me the other day what time she was going to go. And so it's like my whole morning schedule shifts and now I'm late for you guys. That's, all the dads out there listening know that's the deal when they hit middle school and they get that age.
Yeah. Once you hit 12, it's all over. It gets worse. So you're there, Ben. Adam's got a long way to go. Jamie, on the other hand, his oldest, isn't he going to be 12 this year?
In April. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
I remember ours
was similar. A good run, Jamie. It was a good time.
All right, let's get to the rest of the notes here. The Cousins thing was the most important thing. There were several players who got the franchise tag, maybe the most interesting ones. L'Jarius Sneed, because it seems like the Chiefs really might trade him, and we talked so much about him last season. Michael Pittman got the franchise tag. The wide receiver market looks like it's going to be Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown. Those will be the headliners. And not saying that they won't be back with their teams, but we know Pittman's going to be on the Colts, pretty sure anyway, and Mike Evans back with Tampa Bay. Saquon Barkley reportedly wants to stay in New York. I think that means with the Giants. Jason Kelsey retired, not a surprise. Jamie, what'd you make of Dalton Schultz getting a 3-year, $36 million contract with the Texans, re-signing, and $23.5 million guaranteed?
Probably best case scenario for him. Stay with a young up and coming quarterback and an offense that's still very good. Keeping Slowick there as the offense coordinator, I think is positive. Obviously, he's shown what he is on two different teams. A back end fantasy #1 tight end. Somebody that you can take with a late round pick and get good, if not great production. He was much better when somebody was missing last year, whether it was Tank Dell or Nico Collins. But look, I think you just know what he is at this point. So staying with CJ Stroud, staying in the offense, I like it.
The Dolphins are perhaps going to sign Jonnu Smith, who set a career high in every receiving category last year except for touchdowns. He had 50 catches, 582 yards, 3 touchdowns on 70 targets with Atlanta. The Commanders released Logan Thomas and signed Zach Ertz. Dave, does that do anything for fantasy? Zach Ertz to the Commanders?
I don't know if I'm ready to say that Zach Ertz is draftable with a late round pick. I think you've just got to wait and see how things shake out in that Washington offense and maybe get an idea of like how he looks in training camp. It's like one of those things. And who the Commanders play in week 1. Do you even like that matchup? He looks more and more like the type of guy that someone in your draft will take because they recognize his name and then they'll hang on to him for too long.
Other tight ends getting released: Will Dissly by Seattle, Hayden Hurst by Carolina. And then there's a lot of defensive stuff. I think the Bills are having the most interesting week, I guess, with the big names that they released: Tre'Davious White and Jordan Poyer, and also safety Micah Hyde as a free agent. So it's a defense that could look pretty different next year on the back end. Eagles cutting Avonte Maddox, a cornerback. Jaguars releasing safety Rayshon Jenkins. The Chargers releasing Eric Kendricks, a linebacker who I think he had over 100 tackles. He was the number 24 linebacker in our IDP league. Dolphins releasing linebacker Jerome Baker. The Bills signing Mitchell Trubisky, and the Patriots interested apparently in Jacoby Brissett. So next week is free agency week. I don't know how many episodes we'll have. It'll probably be more than 3, but we won't start on Monday morning. It'll start on Monday afternoon when we get some news coming in. And then we have fantasy baseball today is something that you need to know about here. Fantasy baseball season, it's about to start. Baseball season kicks off pretty quick, or first pitch pretty quickly. So get on Fantasy Baseball Today. Listen to that awesome podcast, award-winning podcast. Also Fantasy Baseball Today in 5. Subscribe to those, and you can watch it on youtube.com/Fantasy Baseball Today.
Do you like that I signed us up for our baseball league again without asking you?
No, I didn't accept.
You don't have a choice.
I don't really want to be in that league anymore.
Yes,
Jamie's like, Adam and I are in. I mean, Jamie does most of the work.
Yep.
I would say I do.
I know that how that goes. It's actually good.
It's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do most of the drafting, I think, though, and then Jamie does the in-season work.
Yeah, but when you draft, you're like, I think this guy's good, and then you give me like a reason, and then I go and do some research, and it doesn't really add up, and then you bully me into taking the guy, and then we drop him 3 weeks later.
No, that's so not true. Give me one example. You could give me one example of that. All right. Anyway, let's get to our topic, and it's tips for building whatever you want to call it, the perfect fantasy roster, a good fantasy roster. And I'm going to let Ben go first, and I'm going to let you give all 3, and then we'll talk about them. Give me the 3 tips to building your ideal fantasy roster.
Well, the first one is to understand the volatility of running back volume. I used to talk about this a lot when we would talk about the running back dead zone, about zero RB, some of those concepts. I thought 2023 was a really great year for this idea. There's a lot of different ways that running back volume didn't pan out the way that we tried to project. It's really hard to project over a full season. You had the injuries with like Nick Chubb and J.K. Dobbins. You had expected workhorses just not really being the workhorses, which started early with like a Najee Harris. A lot of people thought would definitely be the workhorse, instead kind of in a split from early on. Mid-season, we saw some guys just lose their work, like a Dameon Pierce loses work to Devin Singletary. It took a little later in Minnesota, but eventually Ty Chandler kind of just takes over for Alexander Madison. We saw it at multiple stages throughout the year. That's one of the reasons it's so hard to project. At what point is it going to happen? Is it going to happen week 2, week 8, week 15? So a variety of different ways that we saw running backs not get the work that we were trying to project. The last one I would point out is Kyren Williams, where we just didn't have the starter right. The week 1 starter, we kind of thought was going to be Cam Akers. It was basically, they wanted Kyren from the early part of the year. That was a tough thing to get right. Not many people had that. He was obviously a very late round pick. They're trading Cam Akers a couple weeks later. So that volatility of running back volume, I think, really impacts the way that you want to build your roster. I try, as a sort of a rule, even if I take early running backs, I try not to take too many of them early. I think you're just stacking risk when you do that. The second thing is recognize the value that an elite tight end can provide, a little bit of a lower replacement level. I also think, we talk about replacement level as like the last viable starter, but I think there's a bigger gap to like tight end 5 than at other positions. You just have to go back to 2022 to look at when Kelsey had I think it was over 100 more PPR points than any other tight end. Those elite tight ends can provide a really huge advantage in any format. And I think that we're kind of heading into a new era for young stars at that position. It's a really interesting thing to consider for 2024 and going and beyond. And then my third thing is understanding where in drafts you can get various things for your build. So this is another thing that I think comes from running back. When we look back and think about, okay, well, how good were the best running backs? I think one of the things we can miss is a lot of those guys came from later in the draft or different areas. And so when you think about building a draft strategy, you want to think about, where was I actually able to pick these types of players in the past? And so for me, that's often meant, look, the best receivers typically come in the early rounds. The better running backs can come, well, kind of from everywhere, typically from the very early rounds, the real elites. But you can get a Kyren Williams to have a great year. You can get a Raheem Mostert to score 21 touchdowns in the late rounds. Kind of stuff happens at running back when guys have surprisingly large roles because it is such a volume-dependent position. So when you think through the ways that you want to layer the different positions throughout your draft, you want to think about where historically the value has actually come from.
Okay, great stuff here. Understand running back volume, volatility. I have one that's pretty similar. Recognize the value that an elite tight end can provide. I will ask you, is that done now with Kelsey at the back end of his career and the tight end position being deeper last year than it was? We'll talk about that. And understanding where in drafts you can get various things for your build. I do have to take a break. We'll take a quick break, come back and dissect these 3 tips from Ben Gretsch right after this.
Who's in? Who's out? Let the madness begin. The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship Selection Show on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, so one of the tips that I had, Ben, was if the only thing you like about a running back is his workload, and then then you might want a different running back. But I amended it to say that running back should not be drafted in the first 4 or maybe even 5 rounds. Because I think, look, I have to admit I was wrong. Rachaad White proved me wrong, and Kyren Williams is not the kind of guy that, even if you told me going into the year, I would have expected, I didn't think he would be that good. So you at least have to allow them the chance to be good. But then you talk about like Najee Harris in 2022 was a first-round pick, and Ramondre Stevenson last year, and who else? Alexander Madison, I would say even Cam Akers. So that's what I at what point do you not really care about the volatility in running back volume and you're willing to take a risk? Like how do we, in other words, how do we take the successes of Rachaad White and Kyren Williams and Joe Mixon? He's not exactly efficient. And James Conner, and the failures of Alexander Madison and Cam Akers, and in the past, Mike Davis and Myles Gaskin, and this past year, maybe somewhat Ramondre Stevenson. How do you mix those and come up with a good strategy?
For me, the lesson there is that it's tough to predict. I mean, it's really tough to predict in August. One of the things that I've taken to saying is you can't even plan your week 17 running backs for your fantasy championship in week 1 or in week 2. You have to understand, like I think in fantasy, in all walks, in fantasy baseball, we're trying to find that guy to lock into our lineup slot. And it makes a lot more sense at wide receiver, at quarterback, at tight end, where you're building your team. I think you can lock in sometimes a guy in week 1 or week 2 and be like, this is my quarterback all year. I mean, I already know this guy's a hit, or my tight end, or my wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, maybe not further down if you're playing a 3-receiver league. Maybe you have to be flexible in that wide receiver 3 spot. But I think at running back, outside of like a Christian McCaffrey, that was basically the lesson this year. If you had a running back early, you couldn't necessarily count on him being your running back late. You needed to be flexible. Think of it like a running back slot in your lineup. I'm going to be playing different guys throughout the year. And so I think the lesson from what you're saying is, yeah, there were some hits, there were some misses at a lot of different areas of the draft, and that means it's kind of tough to predict. And so in terms of building a draft, I don't want to be overweight running backs. I want to do it as cheaply as possible. If I can do it in the later rounds, I could potentially build a team that, I mean, some of the best teams, like if you look at the big best ball contests, are the ones that hit with Raheem Mostert and Kyren Williams late. And because then what they were able to do in the early rounds at all the other positions, along with that, You named some great ones in the late single-digit rounds. David Montgomery's another one we knew would have a role, but not enough touches to go super high, and he was good. James Cook, there were several that you could get in round 6, round 7, round 8, where the opportunity cost becomes less, and I think that's the key, the opportunity cost. You start to get to those late single digits, especially in the double digits, it's a lot easier to pick the more volatile position.
Well, it's why Hero RB works. It's you take one chance early on someone that you're hopefully very confident in, and that doesn't have the same amount of red flags, whether there's a track record or a great situation or a great offense that you're just looking at and saying, okay, I'm really trust that this is going to work out barring injury, and then you just wait and just load up at every other position.
And it's the spirit behind zero RB as well. And this is the direction that we've been going in for fantasy. Oh God, it's got to be a decade now. But the NFL is really kicking into high gear. How many running backs are out there where you look at him and you say, okay, that guy, let's go a little higher than 15 touches per game, maybe 17 touches per game. I don't think there are going to be that many. It might be down to single digits across the league. And so that means that teams aren't investing. Their opportunity cost in running backs isn't a high price for salaries, for example. Maybe the Lions are an exception to that rule because they signed David Montgomery and then they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. But a lot of teams, man, they'll piecemeal their running backs. The 49ers, before they had Christian McCaffrey, man, they were doing that for the longest under Kyle Shanahan. And so if the teams are doing it and they're trying to get 2 running backs every week, kind of doing what the Dolphins want to do, 2 running backs every week that they can lean on at whatever cost that it is, then fantasy managers maybe should kind of shift with them. And so if you're going to draft one or no running backs with your first 3 or 4 picks, and then you just load up and you take all these other running backs that are in that 10 to 15 touch per game range, you just have to find 2 every week that can help you out. You'll play the matchups, you'll see who's healthy, and you'll play the waiver wire as well and get guys off the waiver wire that can help you out. It's a commitment to paying attention to your league every single week and being on that hunt for those running backs. But it's almost worth it because the top wide receivers have outperformed the top running backs. The top tight ends, you heard Ben talk about it. When you've got those guys and you lock them into the lineups, you can feel good about starting them every single week. Same thing with the quarterbacks. And it makes sense to kind of downgrade that running back position, especially after those elite tier running backs are gone.
Okay, and then I just need to point this out, though. I don't know that we should base everything on last year's. Last year was such a bad year for elite running backs because I have it in front of me now. How many top 12 running backs were drafted in rounds 1 or 2 over the past 8 years? And going into last season, we had 6 straight seasons where 7 to 9 of the top 12 running backs, just total points, PPR, were drafted in rounds 1 and 2. So 7 to 9. Last year, it was maybe 4. It was McCaffrey, and then ETN was like his ADP was right around 24. Derrick Henry was like 20th, and Bijan Robinson. They were the only 4 who were drafted in the first 2 rounds that finished top 12. So I guess I just wonder, are we going to – oh, I agree with everything we've said, right? I mean, I hate going running back, even when I like it on paper. It never works out. I talked about that a couple weeks ago or something. But just want to point out, last year was unusually bad for the elite running backs.
But it's also first off, we'll find out next week what a lot of NFL teams think about some of these running backs because there's 5 guys that are somewhat four certainly very heavy hitters, and then Tony Pollard you want to throw him in there with Eckler, Henry, Jacobs, and Barkley of what they've done in the last 5 years or so. And if there's significant investment made to any of these guys, then that sort of says that maybe that team is still looking at them, to Dave's point about maybe still giving them 17 to 20 touches per game, because why would you pay that guy if you're not going to use that guy? Now, obviously, you take into account age for somebody like Henry and Eckler, and maybe some wear and tear, injury issues for somebody like Barkley. Pollard's an experience, so there's a lot of things you could look at, but that's where I think the smart fantasy player looks at it and says, okay, I don't care about that. I don't care that that player has gotten paid and is going to get quote unquote that usage. I'm still not taking that type of risk. I'd rather take the situation that you trust a little bit more and let somebody else overpay for that particular running back, and you're getting maybe the better values later in your draft.
All right, let's go to Ben's second tip here, which is recognize the value that an elite tight end can provide. And do you, how do you feel about that strategy now with, it seems like a changing tight end landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key here is we can look at past trends for all these positions and use them to a certain degree. Tight end's a position where at any given time over the last 10 years, there's maybe been one or two that have been like consistently good. You have a couple guys like a Darren Waller pop up for a couple years of really strong play. But think about Kelsey, you think about Kittle, you think about Ertz. I mean, there's not a ton more over the last decade that were consistently good. And we are at a stage right now over the multiple year trend of the tight end position where those guys are aging out a little bit. I don't think Kittle necessarily is, but it does seem like Kelsey is. I heard that Andy Reid sort of acknowledged they were limiting his snaps a little bit in the regular season to keep an eye on the postseason, which makes sense. They expect to play, 3-4 postseason games every year. So 17 game seasons now, which is something we should add to the running back discussion as well. It's changed the way that teams are looking at how heavily they want to lean on these guys, especially some of these veterans. And it's even impacting a veteran tight end like a Kelsey in terms of how many snaps and routes he is expected to run. And so you have that starting to kind of fade out. I'm not saying Kelsey's he should still be in the top 5, maybe the top 2. But I think it's a really interesting time at the position because I do think somebody or a couple of these other guys are going to be superstars. It looks like we have that next wave in a way that it's been a little bit less clear at running back. That's another one of the issues in the multi-year landscape right now is we had a lot of the young running backs over the last 5 years given serious injuries and things like that. They haven't hit in huge ways. Tight end, they've been hitting, right? Sam Laporta was incredible last year. Sometimes at tight end, it takes a little longer. Trey McBride takes a couple years, but he was fantastic last season. TJ Hawkinson finally hits a little bit later into his career, tears his ACL, but I do feel good once he's back to full health that he's going to be good. I think Cole Kmet is one of the biggest under the radar stories of last year because of the Justin Fields volume issues. But you look at some of his per route run stuff, targets per route run, all of that. He started to look like somebody who developed. He was a 21-year-old rookie a few years back, another young tight end. We expect him to take a couple years to develop. He's a guy that should have a lot more pass volume in his offense, and some of the peripherals look good for him. Good prospect out of Notre Dame as well. I think there's a lot of guys, even like a Michael Mayer. I think we're in for like a new, wave of tight ends this year and next year and the year after. Even like a Kyle Pitts, obviously, if the Kirk Cousins does go to Atlanta or those types of things, still a little bit in on him. So there's a lot of guys I think that will define the next era of tight end. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to pay huge draft capital because some of those guys are cheaper. And it is, again, it's not the prediction part of fantasy football is not always easy. That's why I always talk about these like theory concepts and how can we try to tilt the scales for the predictions we're trying to make. Tight end right now, we don't know who's going to be the next star. It's a little more up in the air. And so I think you can take some stabs at some of the ones that people are already really buying into. Early drafts, people are buying into Sam Laporta, for example. I do think he's going to be a star. I think you can also take some shots on the Kyle Pittses later, and maybe he's a bounce back candidate. But I do think going forward, it's an important thing to recognize where if you look at the scoring at tight end every year, maybe the tight end 1 and the tight end 5, maybe a bigger gap than a lot of other positions where it's not just the gap that it gives you every week over the last place tight end in the starting lineup in your league, the tight end 12. It's the average team you're getting a huge gap on. When you have the prime Kelsey, like the 2022 Kelsey, I mean, some weeks you're gaining 10, 15 points per week just at the tight end position, sometimes even more. I mean, he has 30-point upside. Other guys are scoring 10. And so that can just win you your week. I mean, it can be a monster advantage, obviously depending, and it's not always going to work out perfectly, but I love having an elite tight end. I love the advantage it can provide me on a weekly level over 6 to 8 of my opponents in my league in a way that it's tough to have that big of a positional advantage at any of the other positions.
Drafting the position, though, is going to be very interesting this year.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you said, and I agree with a lot of what you said. How early do you pull the trigger on Laporta? How much do you trust, let's say, McBride with some additional weapons in Arizona, assuming they go that route, which makes a lot of sense. Does Kelsey still provide you the same advantage, which I think based on last year, it's hard to say yes. You just expect him to just still be very good, just not the same elite type of guy. And so that's where it's going to be very, very fun to see, because I think everybody agrees they would love to have that. And that's why we take stabs at George Kittle year after year, and his points per game are always good, but sometimes he misses too much time, and take chances on Kyle Pitts, and we, swing for the fences on somebody like that, and he lets us down. So Adam talks about this all the time with that second tier of guys. We're usually pretty good when they're healthy on, the last couple of seasons, Kelsey and Andrews and what they've been able to produce. And then it's usually, okay, what happens after that? And we whiff on OJ Howard. So, I love the idea of, what we've said the last couple of seasons, great or late. So if you can't get one of those guys, you take some swings on players that look like they're going to be in good spots. Cole Kmet this year is going to be one of my favorites as well. Jake Ferguson and Dalton Schultz, guys that aren't elite, but okay, you know what you're getting. But they're not going to kill you. But yeah, I mean, you'd love to have the elite level guys, and like somebody like Evan Ingram, for example, 100 catches, hard to overlook. What he was able to do last year. Njoku, when Joe Flacco was healthy, what he was able to do. So those guys that became elite based on certain situations.
All right, so Ben, let me just wrap it up with this. Would you rather draft Laporta or Kelsey? Here you have many options. You could take Laporta or Kelsey in round 3. You could take Andrews or McBride in round 4, maybe let's say late round 4. Or you can take Pitts in round 6. Or just wait for Mayer or Musgrave or somebody like that with one of your last picks.
Well, that's part of why I do so many different leagues and different drafts, because I want to explore all those options in different leagues. I'll say my favorite of those right now is the Andrews or McBride in round 4-ish. I think that's when you start to lose the elite value at the other positions. But McBride probably right now my tight end 1 overall. He was that good in terms of per out run stuff and some of the efficiency. They're going to probably add a Marvin Harrison, but I think a rookie receiver helps in terms of drawing attention away, but maybe doesn't hurt the target volume in an extreme way. I just love where McBride's set up for next year. Better quarterback play probably. So I think, and then Andrews is a star. I think that out of those options, that would be the range I'd probably like the most.
Okay. Let's take one more break here. We'll come back. We'll get Ben's last tip. We'll get more from Dave and Jamie. And we have some emails at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. Fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. I should give out the email address more. If you want to send us a question, do that. And that's the letter I, by the way. Fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. We'll be right back.
The Scudetto, where the soul of Italy meets the pinnacle of calcio. Catch Serie A on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount+.
Okay, Ben, explain this last one to us, understanding where in drafts that you can get various positions for your build.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, everything does seem to revolve around running back. That's why all of our draft strategies are named after running backs, right? What did you do at running back? 0 RB, hero RB, anchor RB. Did you hit RBs in the dead zone? It's all about the RBs. I think the best way to talk about this is the running back position. It really is just saying, look, you could get a 21 touchdown running back in Raheem Mostert in round 15 last year. You could get Kyron Williams in a lot of leagues off waivers after week 1. These guys were stars. They were not just good early. They were good late. They were incredible. The fact that you're able to find those types of plays at running back, and Adam, I completely agree with your point earlier that 2023 was a unique season, a very good season to make these points. It doesn't mean it's going to be that way every year. I do think it's important to recognize that it's possible to go this way, right? And so the running back position is a key one where I think you can get such dominant production late. You can get viable quarterbacks late. You can get viable tight ends late. That's why we talk about late round quarterback, late round tight end. But typically they don't provide the monster advantage that like a Travis Kelce in 2022 provided, or the elite quarterbacks. Usually the late round quarterbacks, it's okay, well, they pretty much matched most of them, but not the breakaway superstar. A lot of times there's 1 or 2 breakaway superstar quarterbacks. Those are often the earlier quarterbacks, or at least lately. You go back to obviously rookie year Lamar Jackson, or second year Lamar Jackson, second year Mahomes. When those guys were coming on, they were late round picks that broke the game. But more recently, our quarterback landscape is we know who the elites are, so to speak. And so it's about, okay, where in the drafts can I get the real upside, the real production? And then at wide receiver is the other position that, I mean, if you look at it year over year, Puka Nacua, great counterexample from last year. There's no absolutes in fantasy anywhere. Last year, he was a late round guy who finishes top 5 in basically every scoring format. But if you look over the years, top 5, top 10, it's typically guys that were drafted at wide receiver, typically guys that were drafted Maybe not in the first 2 rounds, but at least in the first 10, right? It's not round 15, round 20, like Mostert, like Kyron Williams last year. So it's understanding where the pockets of value over multiple years come from the different positions, and then also adjusting, like we were just talking about with tight end. The positions change, adjust for the 2024 landscape. But when you understand those concepts, you can then apply them to what you expect and are projecting forward for the positions in 2024 and beyond. And I think that really helps you build out what kind of draft strategy you want to consider for that year.
So I haven't updated these stats, but in the previous 5 seasons, so 2018 through 22, there were only 12 wide receivers total that finished in the top 12 and were drafted in round 7 or later. So it was pretty rare to find wide receivers who finished top 12 drafted after the first 72 picks of the draft.
Is that top 12 on a per game basis or
overall?
total?
Overall.
Okay.
You had guys like Deebo Samuel that one year where he had all those rushing yards, had a great season. I think Jamar Chase was also in that year as a rookie.
Yeah. There might have been 2 guys last year that did that, and that's Puka and Nico Collins. Non-top round 7 wide receivers that finished top 12 in total points scored.
Right. So the top 12 were Lamb, Hill, St. Brown, Puka, A.J. Brown, DJ Moore, who's kind of late for a top 12 guy, Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Nico Collins was 12th. So, yeah.
And the logic for why that happens, it follows. If we think about it, like receivers can't lose their volume, which for me is routes run. They can't lose that because you need 3 receivers out there. There's not teams that are 5 deep that can bench a receiver and bring out. I mean, like, remember a couple years ago, Deontay Johnson had those drops issues. They benched him for like half a game. And then they're like, well, our only other option is to play like Ray McLeod. Like at running back, it's different. You can get benched for the guy behind you and lose all of your work. You don't lose your work at receiver. And then the second part of it is it's way more of a skill-based position in terms of you have to earn the targets. You have to get open. You have to draw volume as opposed to running back where the handoffs are sort of just doled out. They're just kind of given. And so it makes sense that it's the position where the skill and our ability to analyze the skill is going to have more of an impact on who actually does well, or we're going to be better at it.
All right. And I love the way you kind of frame it as everything revolves around running back. And it's so true. So, all right, we got some good tips here about the volatility at running back and much more volatile than at wide receiver in terms of volume and things like that. And basically, if you come out of your draft with like 3 running backs in your first 4 picks, you probably did not do it right. Anyway, let's go to Dave and Jamie now. Dave, give me 3 tips for roster building.
So the first one is buying the dip. Players who are on sale, even if they're not the ideal type of player you'd want, go and get them because they're going to come at a discount on draft day. Who were some of those players last year? Look no further than Breece Hall, who we were drafting in rounds 4 and 5. He ended up having a pretty good year. Alvin Kamara, Mike Evans, Michael Pittman in PPR leagues, Jonathan Taylor, Dak Prescott we were getting late, Chris Godwin, Terry McLaurin, Tua Tagovailoa. Throw in Jerry Jeudy as someone that we were taking at a discounted ADP. He didn't work out, but you get the idea behind it. There's something that happens to these players, whether it's perceived or whether it's an actual situation like an injury or somebody else coming in. Baker Mayfield going to Tampa Bay as an example that makes you want to be like skittish about some players. 2 years ago was the Seattle receivers because Russell Wilson was gone. Geno Smith came in, but those were good players to buy at the dip then. I just listed off a bunch of players that were good to buy at the dip last year. Who are going to be those players this year? I kind of have a list. You guys can tell me if you think that there's going to be a dip with them. There's been a dip so far in our mock drafts based on the ADP that we've had. Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon. Anything those guys have in common? What about Tony Pollard? Are people going to be shy to take him? Joe Burrow, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin again, TJ Hawkinson. I know there's a guy on this show who's ready to pass on TJ Hawkinson unless it's very late. Kyle Pitts. I just added him to this list. There's going to be at least 2 fantasy managers in every single league that had Kyle Pitts and will be scared to death to take him again unless it's super late. Dallas Goedert could be added to that list. When you can get a good player at a discount, yeah, they're going to be flawed. There's going to be some warts, but you take advantage of that. That's my first tip. My second tip is to, and this is just something that I think this is trying to get ahead of the curve on something. I expect scorching demand for the rookie wide receivers coming in. I think Marvin Harrison, assume he's on any team other than the Patriots, I bet he'll be a top 40 pick in every single draft. Maybe not 2 quarterback leagues. Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, they're going to go early too. They're going to be popular. There's going to be a lot of other rookie wide receivers. Someone's going to draft Xavier Worthy in every league just because of what he did at the combine. And then they're going to yell in their draft room 4.21, and they're going to think that they're getting themselves a steal. And maybe they are.
I hope that's not when they drafted him.
Well, no, of course not. But I don't think he's going in round 4 with the 21st pick in round 4. But you're catching my point.
No, what's your tip here? To be aggressive
the
with these
tip
guys?
here is I don't know if you necessarily want to overdraft these rookie wide receivers, but because there's going to be, I don't know, a dozen of them that are going to get drafted in every single league, it's going to push down other wide receivers. And maybe this goes hand in hand with buying the dip. Maybe there's a dip there, but I think you're going to see wide receivers be more available maybe a round later than we're used to seeing. So what we just get done talking about, how round 7 or round 10, somewhere in there is the cutoff to getting a starting caliber fantasy wide receiver, guy that you can feel good about putting in your lineup on draft day. I think you can wait another round later. It's something that I was kind of toying with in my last mock draft. It's why I went so gaga over running backs early on. And as it turned out, I really was left holding the bag at wide receivers. But I bet if we did that draft again a month from now or 2 months from now, when's the draft? Late April. If we did that draft again in May, I'd be able to find wide receivers later on and not have to settle on taking so many running backs. So expect some wide receivers to kind of alter the landscape of how we take these guys.
Ben would have been physically ill at your draft from the last mock draft.
Oh yeah, it was terrible. I hated it myself. And like the more and more I think about it, like I think I'm going to force myself, Jamie, to start not taking running backs until like round 6.
I was gonna say when you went on your rant about how for the last 10 years we've been conditioned to not draft running backs.
I know.
Everybody
so
except you.
But like there was literally no one else that I liked at that spot. Ben, what happened in our last mock draft? I took 2 running backs with my first 2 picks, 2 older wide receivers with my next 2 picks, and then Jamie stole one of the receivers I would have been happy to have as my wide receiver 3, and all that was left was like decent running backs like Joe Mixon and James Conner. We're talking 5-6 turn. And so first of all, I was like, screw it, it's a mock draft. I don't really care. I took them. I couldn't be more disappointed in myself after like I've made parenting decisions that aren't as bad as taking 4 running backs with my first 6 picks. All right. I got one more tip to give you. I feel like this is a good time to pivot back toward waiting on a quarterback on purpose. Whereas last year, I was more in the camp of get a quarterback at a fair value. Now I feel like if you reach for a quarterback, you lose. Remember that line that I used to give Adam, where if you reach, you lose? I think we're back to that point now. I'm not saying that quarterback production is going to stay where it was in 2023. I think a lot of quarterbacks are going to bounce back and they're going to be fine. But it's going to be more than just the top guys, more than just Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. I think we're going to see other quarterbacks start to perform better than they did last year, and more quality quarterbacks that are on the board this year. You know, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud making that jump up. Anthony Richardson still might be regarded as a top 12 quarterback. Justin Fields might still be regarded as a top 12 quarterback. So I don't want to reach for a quarterback ever. And this means not only not taking one in round 1 or round 2 in 1 QB redraft, I'm thinking even round 3 might be a little too early to take Josh Allen at this point. I'd rather go and load up at 2 or 3 wide receivers and maybe 1 running back before I go and take a quarterback. I know I'm going to be able to find a good quarterback late. It doesn't have to be somebody that I'll settle for and say, all right, this guy will get me 20 points a week. No, it can be a quarterback that might be able to get you between 22 and 25 points per week.
Okay, Dave's tips. Buy the dip. I am a French onion dip guy, by the way. But a little guac. I have some delicious guac in the fridge. We'll make some tacos tonight. Buy the dip. Don't overdraft the rookie wide receivers, or at least allow the veterans to become good values, and wait on quarterback. And the 3 names that came to mind for me, Dave, when you said buy the dip, these 3 guys might go back to back to back. Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith. Those are 3 guys.
Excellent calls.
Who want to buy the dip.
Excellent calls, with the exception being that I think there's still enough positive perception about all 3 of those guys where fantasy managers won't be able to find them half a round later in their drafts than what the ADP says.
Oh, they're going maybe a round later than where they were a year ago. I think that's what Adam's point is, that
Okay, and that's fair to say.
It's based on perception. And the couple guys you named, I think actually the reverse may happen after free agency. Like you said, Tony Pollard, I think if he signs as a featured guy, stays in Dallas, as he's, saying he'd take less money to do, he's not going to fall. He's going to stay.
You think he'll be a second rounder?
No, but I think I know you're going based on our drafts, and he was falling in our drafts because people are just worried that he's going to end up somewhere where he's not a feature guy. If he ends up as a starting running back in Dallas, especially after he was the number 1 rated running back by PFF after week 11, you're going to hear that stat ad nauseum. He'll get pushed up back to a point where, he's not going to fall on drafts. Joe Burrow, I don't think is going to fall in drafts. Again, based on where he was last year, yes, but I don't think those guys in particular, those stood out to me as I don't think people are running away from them.
Burrow will be interesting because I think at the highest he's going to be QB5.
Yeah.
At the highest, yeah. All right, but I think there are going to be some drafts where he's like QB8, yeah, which has happened in our drafts. All right, Jamie, what do you got for your 3 tips?
Well, they've said one, and sort of half of one. The quarterback for me is again something I live by, so I'm not getting away from that. Just the ones that I know I'll be targeting. Anthony Richardson will be at the top end of it because I think he'll be somewhere as high as QB6, but I think he'll fall a little bit. So he'll be the first one that I probably will quote unquote reach for. But Kyler Murray, Jordan Love, maybe CJ Stroud if he falls in this range, still Brock Purdy, and I think Justin Herbert falls in this range too. While they may have, certainly some warts and some flaws, based on the value and I think what they'll be able to produce, and you still could get 2 of them if you want to, depending on how deep of a bench you have or the type of league you play in. There's still plenty of upside as we saw from these guys. So waiting on a quarterback is easy for me. The other one, in terms of what Dave said about the rookie wide receivers, it's just taking chances on the guys, not the top 10 guys. It's more of the next group of guys, because think about it, not just Puka, but Tank Dell, Rashee Rice, these were guys that were very late round picks based on redraft leagues and finding just the right opportunities. And it's not just guys like that. It's taking chances on like a Josh Downs, for example, or DeMario Douglas, these type of rookies that are going to be in opportunities that they may not succeed. But instead of taking, the older, like a Zay Jones, for example, who had some hype coming off of last year, even with the addition of Calvin Ridley, people are still drafting him with the idea of Trevor Lawrence taking a step forward. Players like that, avoid those type of guys, take some, dart throws at some of these next tier rookie wide receivers, because as we're seeing, as college games are developing and these players are coming to the league much more prepared to play than ever before, you're seeing some of these guys not necessarily get the hype, but still producing at a high level. And there'll be some guys, the kid from Florida State, for example, he may fall because of his 40 time.
Coleman.
Ends up in a great spot, for fantasy. He's probably a bad example because he does have some name recognition, but you get the point. Some of these second tier rookies that may not get drafted in a lot of fantasy leagues, so just to, again, attach some names to it, A.T. Perry and Trey Turner and some of these guys, not second year receivers. I'm saying what they were as rookies, just opportunities to maybe be contributors. They're going to be players you probably end up cutting anyway. So just take a chance on guys with upside. So those would be 2 for me. And then, when you sent the email about this was easy for me, avoiding older players. I'll continue to be an ageist. It worked out well at wide receiver this year in terms of the broad picture, obviously missing on Keenan Allen and Mike Evans. Those guys were great. Adam Thielen, I kind of put in a different category because he was a late round pick, but avoiding Cooper Kupp, avoiding DeAndre Hopkins, avoiding these older wide receivers that failed. And as I said to you on a previous show, I probably will not take one aside from Tyreek Hill in the first 3 rounds. So I won't take Stephon Diggs. I won't take Devontae Adams. I won't take those guys. Somebody else can have them. I get it. It's just a byproduct of how I look at the position, look at these players, running back as well. Clearly, I think that's easy for everybody, mostly that pays attention to it. So Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, those type of guys, they won't be on my team. But older wide receivers for me, I'm just out on for the most part.
Are you drafting Travis Kelce?
Yeah, like I said, it's mostly wide receiver. Running back, I think, is just kind of tried and true at this point.
Yeah.
But
okay, I just want to know if it went to tight end too.
Yeah, no, tight end is fine, especially for him. You have to make exceptions. You can't just be paint everything with a broad stroke. I think Ben's said that very well earlier, that you just can't go year over year and just say everything's sort of fits into a box. But for me, in terms of just these older wide receivers, it's losing a step. And again, it's not just always them. I think Devontae Adams is still a great player, and he just had crappy quarterback play last year. DeAndre Hopkins had crappy quarterback play last year. But your point, Dave, about Baker Mayfield, we were scared that he was going to be terrible for Mike Evans. He was great. So again, not every situation is exactly going to be repeatable year over year. But just for me, I'm out on those type of players. I just think that you see the step is lost, and you're having to pay a premium price for what they have done as opposed to what they will do.
So let me ask all of you here, because here's the issue I have with Stephon Diggs. I get it. He's getting older or whatever, but he's still on what I think will be a great offense, right? I mean, I think we all can agree with that, as long as he's on the Bills. And then the bigger issue is, let's look at the 12 players who went after Stephon Diggs in our most recent draft. He went 24th overall. And I'll just say the name, and you guys can tell me if you'd rather have this guy or Stephon Diggs, because I just feel like a lot of these guys like, oh, I don't love Diggs, but do I really want this guy over him? Okay, here we go. So would you rather have Stephon Diggs or Travis Kelce?
Kelce.
I think I'd rather have Kelce.
Stephon Diggs or Keenan Allen?
Neither.
I think I'd put Diggs ahead of Allen.
I think I'm taking Allen.
Okay. Jamie's just going to...
That's close.
Jamie's just going to wait till next. He's just going to skip his third round pick. Stephon Diggs or Sam Laporta?
Laporta.
I think I have Laporta higher.
I think it's going to get a little harder here. This is a full PPR league.
This is already not easy.
I know, right? Stephon Diggs or Cooper Kupp? Oh, sorry. Tank Dell. Tank Dell is next.
Dell. I took Dell.
I would take Dell.
I think I would take Diggs. I'm a little concerned about Dell's size. I mean, the fact that the way that he got rolled up on was really fluky, but I'm a little concerned about his ability to hold up.
That's true. Dikembe Mutombo, Stephon Diggs is actually much bigger.
That's fair. That's a good one. That's a good one.
It's Cooper Kupp.
That's Diggs.
Diggs.
Debo Samuel.
Debo.
Really?
Yeah,
in a
Debo.
PPR league? How many catches did Debo Samuel have last year? Let's see. He had 60 catches in 15 games. Like, Diggs could have 100 catches. All right. Rashad White.
Diggs.
I think I'd say Diggs. He's
Jalen
like right in that late round 3 range. I don't know if White might be in that same range too.
Jalen Waddle, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans.
I'm taking Waddle and Ayuk.
Yeah, you'll take the younger guys ahead of Diggs.
I'm taking Diggs over Evans, I think, even though Evans
I would take Diggs over Evans.
so good every year.
So he finds a way to be consistent, but you don't want to fall into that trap either, right? Isn't that putting a guy in a box? I mean, I'll say it every time with Mike Evans about what his pass has been, but that's
what makes him so
of a fall off, right? I know what you're about to say. That's what makes him so like easy,
unique. Yeah, and that too. But I mean, I love Jamie's last point there when he was giving us 3 big points, because I mean, we joke about NFL not for long league, but like it really is true. Like the peaks of players, you go look at it, there are so few that do what Mike Evans has done. I mean, it's 3 years of a peak for a lot of guys, and then they're just never really the same. It's hard to be that consistently great in the NFL.
The other flip side to it all too is there something we didn't know about Diggs, because he was pretty good before they changed offensive coordinators. And then once they changed offensive coordinators, he it looked like he aged 7 years.
Well, it's Josh Allen's numbers weren't nearly as good.
Right. You know, he wasn't throwing quite as much.
As I've said many times, this is exactly what happened at the end of the 2021 season, and Diggs came back with a huge 2022 season. And I'm very conflicted about it. I agree, Jamie. I agree. You don't want to invest too much in old receivers. I mean, I would certainly not take like Diggs and Adams in the first 3 rounds. I think that's a recipe for disaster. But I think what's going to separate it for me, and this will transition into I'll just give my 3 points quickly so we can read emails here. What's going to separate it for me is I think Diggs can survive because he will be in one of the best offenses in football, which the Bills are every year. Whereas I have no idea what the Raiders offense is going to be like for Devontae Adams. So my first point is,
I'll just say real quick, and I may have to just amend the third round, line of demarcation here. It's probably going to be a receiver number as opposed to a round number. So wide receiver 15, I won't take one of those guys. So we'll get to a point in July where I kind of establish where I'm completely out on a guy. Because like I said, you listed a few guys in the third round that I would take Diggs over. So it's probably going to be a receiver number as opposed to a round.
Okay. Now my 3 tips are, if you care about the quality of offense and you're making, he's going to be on a good offense. Some people are like that. They care a lot about that. Quarterback and wide receiver are the most affected by that. You should not care nearly as much about the quality of offense that your running back is on. You should care, And also, it's very hard to predict. Everything's hard to predict. So nothing's perfect. I can't sit here. I did not think the Buccaneers would be. I think they were 20th in scoring or 19th in scoring. I didn't think they'd be that high. 2 years ago, like the Giants were 18th in scoring. And then this past year, I think they were 32nd or whatever. So I know that
they're 22nd in passing too. I heard that too.
They were right. So
not too bad.
So anyway, what I'm saying is, if you are concerned about a player's offense, that matters a lot more at wide receiver than it does at running back. Quarterback too, but that kind of makes sense. I mean, how do you have a good offense with a bad quarterback? But wide receiver, that's a much bigger deal. Second one, I already said, if the only thing you like about a running back is his workload, that running back should not be drafted in the first 4 or maybe even 5 rounds. We've already done enough on that. And then my third tip, to me, this is a year to do it. Draft a high-end backup quarterback. I think there's a lot of them this year. I think Trevor Lawrence, I'm not giving up on him. I think Deshaun Watson actually has a chance to be, even if he's not a great NFL quarterback, a pretty good fantasy quarterback.
Deshaun Azer's back, baby.
And then you've got Caleb Williams in the mix as well. I don't know where he's going to go, but he's either going to be a high-end backup, or he's going to knock someone else like Tua Tagovailoa, who could throw for 5,000 yards because he's led the NFL. Has Tua led the NFL in passing? No, not 2 years in a row. But he's been up.
First time.
Oh, right, because he got hurt. But he was on pace for like 5,000 yards the year before almost. So draft a high-end backup, even if you feel good with your quarterback. Keep him from a different team, or you never know what's going to happen with your starter. So those are my 3 things. All right, let's
surprised that Ben didn't have a fourth one of just always draft AJ Brown or DJ Moore. You can be good.
Yeah, profit.
Email here. But I think I'd be remiss not to ask how you feel as a Washington Husky about Penix and Odunze. Give us a little insight.
Odunze was just an absolute superstar in college. He's a guy that every time you needed a big play, third down, those types of things, you knew the ball was going to go to him, and he always made plays. I couldn't really be higher on him. I'm not as high on Jalen McMillan, but he's really athletic, and he brings some things. I liked Jalen Polk more of those secondary receivers. All 3 of those guys tested really well, and I think are all going to get drafted reasonably high and be talked about. Odunze is obviously the star. Penix throws an incredible ball. I thought our system really helped him. I think one of the things that people are missing with him is he did miss some throws at times, but we just had such a vertical and aggressive style that people talk about like he's a great deep ball thrower, and I think he is. He throws some really great deep balls when you watch him on film, but you'll see some where he missed some open throws early last year, especially. I think the Boise State game, he's got guys open and overthrowing them. I'm like, he can't miss those throws and be a high-end player. But he does have huge hands and throws a really great spiral in all conditions. We get rainy weather up here. He could still throw in the rain when Washington was playing in rainy games. I think he could be a decent NFL quarterback. I think he's kind of is what you see when you watch him. He throws a good spiral. He's pretty accurate, but he's not perfect by any means.
Yeah. And you don't have to comment on this if you agree, but played behind arguably the best offensive line in football last year. And then we saw that Michigan game, when the protection broke down, it wasn't great for Penix. So you'll see what team he goes to in the NFL. But if he's got a bad young offensive line, it could spell trouble.
Definitely agree.
Quarterbacks struggle behind bad offensive lines.
Some more than others. Some more than others. All right, this is from Bill. Why is DJ Moore such a good pick? I do not understand. He shows no stats that would make him more than an unreliable best ball wide receiver 3.
Get him, Ben. Get him, Ben.
Well, I think the biggest thing is the Bears, you have to expect a lot more pass volume. And I think there's a lot that you do have to love about DJ Moore. I mean, he didn't earn targets at a really high rate per route last year, but some of that's because Fields takes a lot of sacks and scrambles a lot. So there's dropbacks that aren't becoming targets. And then he's very efficient when he does earn the target. So a different quarterback, maybe he gets more target volume as a result. We know he can do so much with the ball in his hand, the yak ability, all that stuff. He's really good. I don't know how there's not stats that show that. I think there's a lot of stats that do show that he's very good.
I guess the one stat would be that this was his first year finishing as a top 12 receiver, I'm pretty sure. At least per
a lot
game.
of that's touchdowns, and at least he's gotten through the early year stuff. Remember when he would only score 4 touchdowns a year? His final year in Carolina, he finally got to 7. This last year, he got 9, I think, total, 8 receiving, 1 rushing. That was something we always talked about, back when I was on the show. It's like, is this really going to keep up forever? Is he only going to score 4 touchdowns a year forever? It finally looks like, his yak ability, his ability after the catch is translating to the ability to score some touchdowns, which we would have always expected. I think that's my expectation for him going forward is he's an 8-9 touchdown guy, not a 4 touchdown guy. So that's a big reason why he never finished super high in his better years early in his career.
That is DJ Moore. Our next question is from Anthony. And where's Anthony from, Dave?
Anthony is from
Whole Fire Pizza.
Butte, Montana.
Just curious why I keep hearing you say Quentin Johnston is the only wide receiver there if they cut Williams and Allen. Josh Palmer is a far superior talent and has shown far more production than Quentin Johnston. Yada, yada, yada. Why? I think it's a good point. Why haven't we mentioned Josh Palmer?
I don't know if there's
No, he's not. He's in a contract year coming up. So I don't know what his role is going to be. Is he the number 3 receiver in LA? Or is he going to have a chance to be the number 2 receiver in LA, beat out Quentin Johnston?
Absolutely. I mean, he was clearly the guy to have ahead of Quentin Johnston.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's because Quentin Johnston struggled. I don't know. This is the one where I would say I don't know if there's any stats that say that Josh Palmer is great, other than he's been good when he's gotten big route volume. But when you look at the per route stuff, targets per route run, the stuff he's earned, especially when you're playing with a guy like Justin Herbert, he's been efficient because he has a great quarterback, but he doesn't earn a bunch of volume. He seems like just a guy to me when you dig into his numbers.
He seems like a really good bench receiver for an NFL team. And then when you need him, you put him on the field and he comes through. I'm sure he's going to have an opportunity to compete in training camp. It's a brand new coaching staff. But hand in hand with that is it's a coaching staff that has a track record of not airing it out. And so I'd be worried about a volume crunch there in LA with all the receivers, including Palmer and Johnston and Keenan Allen.
All right, from Kevin. I'm curious why Superflex is where's Kevin from?
He's also from Butte, Montana. Have we ever done that before? 2 guys from the same town?
They have a great St. Patrick's Day celebration in Butte, Montana that I went to in spring break in college. It was fantastic. Shut down the whole city.
Wow.
It's unbeautiful.
Yeah. I mean, all I think about with spring break is people coming to Florida. I never thought about Montana,
Montana.
as a hot spring break spot.
It seems like something Adam would do.
It
It was a road trip.
I don't think Adam ever went out for spring break.
You know what I did?
I went to his
Florida,
parents'
so that
house.
doesn't count.
That road trip ended at the Grand Canyon in Arizona, Dave. We did make it to warm weather, so it was a long road trip for spring
That's
break that year.
fantastic.
I'm pretty sure I was broadcasting Miami baseball games for the student radio station over spring break. It says all the other kids at the station went to Daytona or whatever, or Butte, Montana. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll work.
Yeah. Wild
right.
Coral Gables.
Yeah. Why is Superflex the standard in Dynasty, but not in redraft leagues? If it's so popular in the most serious leagues, I would not say Dynasty is the most serious leagues, by the way. Okay. Let's not crap on redraft here. Why does that not carry over to redraft leagues?
My argument would be that in Dynasty, because you have the same roster every year, player movement is so much more important. You need to juice up the trade markets and stuff. When you play single QB in Dynasty, quarterbacks just don't get traded. They don't get moved for multiple years because there's enough to go around. So that's the thing that Superflex does. It artificially boosts the quarterback position and makes them go higher in rookie drafts. It makes them much more interesting trade assets. That stuff isn't quite as important in redraft, but I mean, Superflex redraft's fun too. But yeah, I think it's just all about the trade market, the off-season stuff in Dynasty.
I remind people what Scott Fish said on our show before the season started. He said, I think he said his kids were like, you play in 1 quarterback leagues? Young kids are playing Superflex now, which I find, but I don't see that. I have my nephew and my cousin's kid, and I don't think they're in any Superflex leagues. They're about 10 to 12 years old right now. I don't know. Jamie, your kid play any Superflex leagues?
Not yet, no.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It'd probably be a little surge in Superflex, I would imagine.
Well, it's also,
Yeah,
I think, as we see, quarterback play getting better and better year over year, it's like, I don't want to just draft these, like you said, Adam, draft 2 great quarterbacks, or it's a good year to draft 2 quarterbacks because they're going to be great. Like, you don't want to see these players just getting wasted where you can't use them. It's more fun to use them.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, from Nathan, dear Marcus, Derek. Oh, Nathan is from Butte, Montana, I believe.
No, he's not.
Dear Marcus, Derek, Bryce, and
What if
Rob.
he actually was?
Yeah, that'd be great. Marcus, Derek, Bryce, and Robert. This feels so gettable.
It feels like a basketball thing in the 90s. Like I'm
Marcus, Derek, Bryce,
Robert Ory, Derek Coleman. What? I don't know.
Marcus Camby.
Yeah.
Derek Fisher.
Name is there a Bryce in basketball? Oh, Bryce Drew.
I was thinking of Bruce
I think we
Bowen.
probably find football players with these names too. Is the gap between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors larger or smaller than the difference between Neighbors and Odunze?
I think
There's
the
some
gap.
people who think that Neighbors is the best receiver in this class.
Yes.
There are.
There are
I
also
would.
Odunze is better than Neighbors.
Right.
Yeah, I would say the gap between Neighbors and Odunze is tighter than between Harrison and one of the other receivers.
That's what I was going to say. I think Harrison is looked at very, very favorably, which is not to knock Neighbors, but I think people really like Neighbors, so they're putting him up in a group with Harrison, and Harrison's just in a group of his own, and it's also kind of disrespectful to Odunze, who I think, I'm a UW guy, I'm a little biased, but I think you got to be high on Odunze too. That guy's going to be really good.
He's a rock star.
What were the names again, Adam?
Marcus, Derek, Bryce, Robert.
Marcus, Derek, Bryce, and Robert.
I would
Those
say
are
they're
the four
tying to Marcus
people
Allen
that-
and Derrick Henry, but the other two.
No, those are the four people that listen to Adam's spring break baseball broadcast.
No, that's not true. It had a nice audience. Oh, I saw a mock draft, I think, on The Athletic yesterday with the Giants getting Marvin Harrison. Oh, man, I'm so pumped. That would be wonderful. 3 quarterbacks, an edge rusher, and an offensive lineman with the first 5 picks.
I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if there's 4 quarterbacks and Bowers.
Well, I think that I think the question is, do the Chargers with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, do they take a wide receiver at 5, or do they go more physical with the Bauer with a tight end, or more likely, maybe not, I don't know, more likely, but equally likely an offensive tackle?
Well, I mean, the Cardinals and the Chargers have to just be, on the phone, just fielding offers for
Absolutely.
trade downs.
Yeah.
You just don't want to see Harrison go to the Patriots.
Yeah. I don't, or honestly, I want to, but as a fantasy manager, I don't want to see him go to the Giants either.
Well, I mean, who's his quarterback going to be at those places?
It'll be Daniel Jones this year.
If it's Daniel Jones or Jacoby Brissett, I think we'll be pretty unhappy, but we'll still take Harrison higher than you would typically take a rookie wide receiver.
Ben
Matt
Gretsch.
Jones
Kyler
worked on
Murray,
lower
that's
passes.
pretty good.
He's in good shape.
Ben Gretsch, thank you very much.
Yeah, great
We
to be
missed
on with
Ben.
you guys again. Yeah, it's been a blast.
It's like the 3rd time or 4th time I've tried to get Ben on. He's always way too busy. That other
He
stuff.
just hates
He's
you.
got
He's
other
waiting for
stuff.
the day you're not hosting.
Everybody appreciate you being here, and we'll talk to you next week. Remember,
Everybody, where to find Ben?
in Washington.
Yeah,
Where do
I
we
have a newsletter, bengresh.substack.com, the Stealing Signals newsletter. Find me there.
I'm subscribed to that, by the way. It's excellent stuff.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you Monday afternoon with some free agency talk.